The county courthouse stood tall and imposing against the blue sky as Maya Chen walked up the steps, her heart pounding in her chest. At just 17, she was easily the youngest person entering the building not accompanied by a parent. Her hands clutched a worn leather briefcase, borrowed from her father, that seemed too big for her small frame. She checked her watch. 20 minutes early. Maya always made sure to be early, especially today. What had started as a simple high school mock trial exercise had suddenly become real when her cousin Lily got into trouble over a disputed traffic ticket. The attorney who was supposed to represent him had called in sick that morning, and somehow Maya had volunteered to step in. "You've been studying this stuff for months with your club," Lai had pleaded. "It's just a traffic thing, please." Now, as she passed through security and navigated the echoing hallways, Maya wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. She found courtroom 3 and slipped inside, the heavy door closing behind her with a soft thud. A few people sat scattered throughout the benches, but Maya's eyes were fixed on the bench at the front where Judge William Hargrove would soon sit. Everyone in town knew about Judge Hargrove. Her mock trial teacher had warned students about his reputation: strict, old-fashioned, and not particularly patient with inexperienced attorneys. What her teacher hadn't mentioned, but Maya had heard from others, was that the judge sometimes made comments that crossed the line, especially with people who weren't white. Maya straightened her simple navy blazer and checked her notes one last time. She knew the vehicle code by heart. She had prepared her argument meticulously. Lee's ticket was for running a red light, but the traffic camera footage showed the light was yellow when he entered the intersection. This should be straightforward. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Hargrove entered, a tall man with silver hair and cold eyes that swept over the courtroom before landing on Maya. One eyebrow raised slightly. "First case," the clerk announced. "Chen versus State Traffic Authority." Maya stood on shaky legs. "Maya Chen, representing the defendant, Your Honor." Judge Hargrove looked down at her over his reading glasses. "You're the attorney of record." "Yes, Your Honor. I'm representing my cousin in this matter." A small smile played at the corners of the judge's mouth. "And how old are you, Miss Chen?" 17, Your Honor, but I've studied the relevant statutes and—" The judge's laugh cut her off. It wasn't loud, but it echoed in the quiet courtroom, making Maya's cheeks burn. 17, he repeated, looking around the courtroom as if sharing a joke. "Well, I suppose everyone starts somewhere. Though in my day, teenagers were busy with math homework and video games, not playing lawyer." Someone in the back of the courtroom snickered. Maya felt her throat tighten but forced herself to continue. "If I may present our case, Your Honor, according to Traffic Code Section 21,453, a vehicle entering an intersection during a yellow light is not in violation, and the evidence clearly shows." "Ms. Chen," the judge interrupted, "perhaps you should first learn to pronounce jurisdiction correctly before citing traffic codes." Maya hadn't even said that word. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I—" "And while we're giving advice," Judge Hargrove continued, "lean forward. Your people usually excel at memorizing facts. Perhaps stick to that skill set rather than attempting to argue points of law." The courtroom fell silent. Maya stood frozen, the unmistakable meaning of "your people" hanging in the air. The prosecutor looked uncomfortable but said nothing. For the next 15 minutes, Maya tried to present her cousin's case, but Judge Hargrove interrupted her repeatedly, smirking at her nervous stumbles and making little comments that drew lines between them: his years of experience versus her youth, his authority versus her presumption, his background versus hers. By the time he ruled against Lai and upheld the ticket with additional court fees, Maya's carefully prepared notes were crumpled in her fist. As she walked out of the courtroom, tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. The humiliation burned like fire in her chest, but something else was taking root alongside it. Something that felt a lot like determination. Maya walked home slowly, her father's briefcase feeling 10 times heavier than it had that morning. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, but she barely noticed. All she could hear was Judge Hargrove's mocking laugh echoing in her head. The front door of her family's modest 2-story house opened before she even reached it. Her mother stood there, excitement on her face, quickly turning to concern. "What happened?" she asked, ushering Maya inside. The familiar smell of ginger and garlic from her mother's cooking filled the air, but Maya couldn't even think about food. "I lost," Maya said simply, dropping the briefcase by the door, and it was horrible. In the kitchen, Maya's father was already home from his hospital shift, still wearing his doctor's coat with the sleeves rolled up. He listened quietly as Maya poured out everything: the snide comments, the unnecessary interruptions, the clear prejudice in Judge Hargrove's tone and words. When she finished, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, her father nodded slowly. He took off his glasses, cleaning them with the edge of his shirt, something he always did when thinking deeply. "When I first came to this country," he said, "I was already a doctor with 5 years of experience. But they made me take tests again, redo my residency. My supervisor at the hospital would check my work 3 times. Once, he told a patient in front of me that they could wait for a real American doctor if they preferred." Maya had heard bits of this story before, but never the full version. "What did you do?" she asked, wiping her eyes. Her father smiled. "I became the best doctor in that hospital. So good that even he had to admit it. That man later came to me when his own mother was sick." He reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "The best revenge isn't anger, it's excellence." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the courtroom scene in her mind, but now, instead of feeling shame, she felt something new growing inside her. She got out of bed and went to her desk, opening her laptop. By morning, she had read through dozens of articles about law school requirements, LSAT preparation, and scholarship opportunities. She'd made lists, set goals, created a plan. When her alarm went off for school, Maya was already dressed, a new fire burning in her eyes. During the next few weeks, Maya's bedroom transformed. Law books appeared on her shelves, some borrowed from the library, others ordered used online with her savings. While her friends chatted about upcoming dances and college parties, Maya was researching case law and court procedures. Her best friend Priya noticed the change first. "You're really serious about this law thing, aren't you?" she asked one day during lunch as Maya highlighted passages in a worn copy of Introduction to American Law. "I am," Maya replied without looking up. "I made a promise to myself." What had started as a way to process her humiliation was becoming something more, a calling. Maya began visiting the courthouse on days when she didn't have school, sitting quietly in the back of different courtrooms, watching attorneys present their cases. She took detailed notes, studying their techniques, their language, their confidence. At night, she practiced in front of her mirror, working to eliminate the nervous habits Judge Hargrove had mocked. She trained herself to speak clearly, to stand tall, to maintain eye contact. Her parents worried about her intensity but supported her completely, even when she announced she wanted to take extra classes to graduate high school a year early. 6 months after that fateful day in court, Maya sat at the family dinner table with college brochures spread out before her. But these weren't just any colleges. They were the top pre-law programs in the country. "I'm going to become an attorney," she told her parents, her voice steady and certain. "And someday I'll stand in front of Judge Hargrove again. And next time he won't be laughing." Her father looked at her mother, then back at Maya. The pride in his eyes spoke volumes. "He won't know what hit him," he said with a smile. 7 years passed like the turning pages of a book. The shy, embarrassed teenager who had once stumbled over her words in a county courthouse was gone. In her place stood Maya Chen, Harvard Law graduate, her diploma still fresh and crisp in its frame. Maya stood in front of her apartment mirror in Boston, adjusting the collar of her tailored suit. At 24, she looked older than her years, not in her face, which still held its youthful glow, but in her eyes, which carried the weight of countless late nights studying, the pressure of being the youngest in every class, and the determination that had pushed her through it all. Her phone buzzed with messages from classmates. Job offers from prestigious law firms in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles filled her email inbox. Her professors had called her exceptional, brilliant, a once-in-a-generation legal mind. The path ahead seemed clear: join a top firm, make partner in record time, build a career in a big city far from her hometown. But Maya had different plans. "You're doing what?" her roommate Diane asked, watching in disbelief as Maya packed her books into cardboard boxes. "You turned down Patterson and Hughes. That's like turning down the legal equivalent of the Olympics." Maya smiled, carefully wrapping her law school textbooks in newspaper. I'm going home. There's a small civil rights firm there that needs help. A small firm in your hometown, Diane repeated slowly. The same hometown with that awful judge who humiliated you. The one you told me about freshman year. Judge Hargrove, Maya said, the name no longer causing her stomach to knot. Yes, that's the one. Maya, you graduated top of our class. You could go anywhere, do anything. I know, Maya replied, taping up a box labeled Constitutional Law. And what I want to do is go back. 3 weeks later, Maya walked into the modest offices of Gould & Associates, a firm specializing in discrimination and civil rights cases. The waiting area had mismatched furniture, and the receptionist's desk was actually an old door balanced on 2 filing cabinets. Nothing like the marble and glass palaces where her classmates were starting their careers. Thomas Gould, a kind-faced man in his 60s, showed her to a tiny office with a single window. It's not much, he said apologetically, and the pay's even less. Last chance to change your mind and join those big city sharks. Maya set her father's old briefcase, the same one she'd carried that fateful day in court, on the desk and looked around. It's perfect, she said. In the months that followed, Maya threw herself into her work with the same intensity she'd shown in school. She took on case after case, often working with clients who couldn't afford legal help elsewhere, immigrants facing deportation, workers fired for discriminatory reasons, families fighting housing injustice. Her colleagues noticed something curious about her case selection. Every case, no matter how different, seemed to have one thing in common. If it went to trial, it would likely appear in Judge William Hargrove's courtroom. You're building toward something, Thomas observed one evening as they worked late, case files spread across the conference room table. I've been watching. Every case you take, it's like you're preparing for a specific battle. Maya looked up from her notes. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been practicing law for 40 years, he said with a gentle smile. Want to tell me what this is really about? Maya walked to the window, looking out at the darkened street. 7 years ago, a judge in this town made me feel worthless because of my age and my race. He laughed at me, made me doubt myself. And now you're planning to face him again, Thomas said. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded. But not until I'm ready. Not until I'm so good, so prepared, that even he can't find a way to dismiss me. Thomas joined her at the window. Revenge is a tricky business in our profession. It's not about revenge, Maya said quietly. It's about justice. And maybe, just maybe, changing one small corner of the system. Well then, Thomas said, handing her another case file, let's keep building your arsenal. The moment Maya had been preparing for arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. The Patel family, owners of a small grocery store, had been denied a business permit despite meeting all requirements. Other store owners in the same area, all of them white, had received their permits without issue. It was exactly the kind of case that would land in Judge Hargrove's courtroom. Maya stood outside the courthouse, rain tapping gently on her umbrella. The building hadn't changed in 7 years, still tall, still imposing, but this time Maya wasn't intimidated. She took a deep breath and walked up the steps, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor as she made her way to courtroom 3. The room was nearly identical to her memory. Same wooden benches, same flags flanking the judge's bench, same portrait of a stern-faced former justice on the wall. Maya set her briefcase, a new one, a graduation gift from her parents, on the table and began organizing her documents. You must be the new attorney from Gould's office, said the prosecutor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who introduced himself as David. I heard Thomas finally got some help. Maya Chen, she said, offering her hand. Nice to meet you. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge William Hargrove entered. He looked older than Maya remembered, his hair now completely white, deeper lines around his eyes. He settled into his chair with the comfortable ease of someone who had occupied the same position of power for decades. First case, the clerk announced. Patel versus County Business Authority. Maya stood, her posture perfect. Maya Chen, representing the plaintiffs, Your Honor. Judge Hargrove glanced at her over his reading glasses, much as he had done 7 years ago. But this time, there was no immediate recognition in his eyes, just the usual dismissive look he gave to attorneys he didn't know, especially young ones. You're new, he said flatly. I haven't seen you in my courtroom before. I joined Gould and Associates 6 months ago, Your Honor, but I'm familiar with court procedures in this district. The judge made a small humming noise. We'll see about that. Proceed with your opening statement. Maya launched into her carefully prepared statement without notes. Her voice was clear and confident, filling the courtroom with undeniable authority. She cited 3 precedent cases that directly apply to her client's situation, complete with exact dates and specific rulings. A subtle change came over Judge Hargrove's face. The bored expression gave way to mild surprise, then growing interest. By the time Maya finished her opening, he was sitting up straighter, his attention fully captured. "That's quite thorough, Ms. Chen," he said, an unfamiliar note of respect in his voice. The trial continued into the afternoon. Maya called her first witness, Mr. Patel, guiding him gently through his testimony about the permit denials. When the prosecutor began his cross-examination with questions about Mr. Patel's understanding of local regulations, Maya objected immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. The question implies the plaintiff lacks understanding of regulations he has successfully navigated for 20 years in his previous business location. It's both prejudicial and irrelevant to the permit denial." Judge Hargrove paused, studying Maya with increasing curiosity. "Sustained," he said finally. As the day progressed, Maya presented evidence with surgical precision. She anticipated the prosecutor's objections before he made them. She quoted county regulations word for word. When Judge Hargrove asked a particularly complex question about a technical aspect of zoning law, Maya answered without hesitation, even referencing a little-known case from 15 years ago that directly supported her argument. By the end of the first day, murmurs circulated through the courtroom. The court reporter whispered to the clerk. The bailiff watched with undisguised admiration. Even the prosecutor looked impressed. Judge Hargrove kept stealing glances at Maya throughout the proceedings, a puzzled expression on his face, as if trying to solve a riddle. As he adjourned court for the day, he looked directly at her. "Ms. Chen, you seem familiar somehow. Have we met before?" Maya gathered her papers calmly. "Yes, Your Honor," she said simply. "We have." She left the courtroom without elaborating, leaving the judge staring after her with a furrowed brow and the first seeds of recognition beginning to take root. Day 3 of the trial began with a buzz of anticipation in the courtroom. Word had spread about the impressive young attorney taking on Judge Hargrove, and several local lawyers had come to watch. Maya noticed them filing in, nodding politely as she arranged her documents. Today was crucial. She would cross-examine the county official who had denied the Patel's permit. As she reviewed her notes, she felt Judge Hargrove watching her from the bench. Since their exchange at the end of day 1, he'd been studying her with growing intensity, like someone trying to remember the name of a song. "Court is in session," the bailiff announced, and the room fell silent. Maya stood. "Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Robert Wilson, County Permit Director." A balding man in his 50s took the stand, looking uncomfortable as he was sworn in. Maya approached him with a calm smile. "Mr. Wilson, how long have you worked for the County Permit Office?" 17 years, he replied. "And in those 17 years, approximately how many business permits has your office approved?" "Hundreds, maybe thousands. I don't keep an exact count." Maya nodded, her expression pleasant. "And in those hundreds or thousands of permits, how many were for business owners who weren't white?" The courtroom tensed. The prosecutor half rose to object, but seemed to think better of it. I don't know. We don't track that information," Wilson said, shifting in his seat. "Let me help you then," Maya said, handing him a document. "This is a list of all business permits approved in this county over the past 5 years. I've highlighted the names of business owners from minority backgrounds. Would you mind counting them for us?" Wilson squinted at the paper. "There's 6. 6 out of 147, Maya confirmed. Less than 5% in a county where minorities make up 32% of the population. Does that strike you as unusual?" "Objection calls for speculation," the prosecutor said. "I'll rephrase," Maya responded smoothly. "Mr. Wilson, the Patel's application was identical to one submitted by Valley Grocers 3 months earlier. Valley Grocers was approved in 2 weeks. The Patels have been waiting 7 months. Can you explain the difference in processing time?" Wilson fumbled with his words. Each application has unique circumstances. Maya walked to her table and picked up another document. Your Honor, I'd like to reference Traffic Code Section 21453, which states that a vehicle entering an intersection during a yellow light is not in violation, and the evidence clearly shows. She stopped abruptly, as if catching herself. The courtroom went quiet, confused by this apparent non sequitur about traffic laws in the middle of a business permit case. But Judge Hargrove's face had gone completely still. Ms. Chen, he said slowly, his voice different somehow, would you approach the bench? The prosecutor joined them at the judge's bench. Judge Hargrove barely acknowledged him, his eyes fixed on Maya. That traffic code, he said quietly. Why did you mention it just now? Maya met his gaze steadily. A momentary confusion, Your Honor. I apologize. No, Judge Hargrove said. You said those exact words in my courtroom before. The prosecutor looked between them, confused. Judge Hargrove's eyes widened with sudden clarity. 7 years ago, a traffic dispute. You were just a teenager representing your cousin. Maya said nothing, but her slight nod confirmed it. I need 15 minutes, Judge Hargrove announced abruptly to the courtroom. Court is in recess. In his chambers, Judge Hargrove pulled open his filing cabinet with shaking hands. He found the old case file, flipping through it until he found the transcript from that day. Reading his own words, the mockery, the thinly veiled racism, made his stomach turn. He remembered the girl's face now, how she had tried to hold back tears. That girl was now the brilliant attorney commanding his courtroom. When court resumed, Judge Hargrove's demeanor had changed completely. He sat up straighter, listened more intently. When Maya presented her final arguments, methodically dismantling the county's excuses for denying the permit, he didn't interrupt once. As she finished, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. She had returned, just as she had promised herself she would. And she had done it not through anger or vengeance, but through pure, undeniable excellence. The whispers around the courtroom grew louder. Something extraordinary was happening, though few understood exactly what. The trial continued for 2 more days, but something fundamental had changed in courtroom 3. Judge Hargrove, known throughout the county for his interruptions and dismissive comments, sat quietly as Maya presented her case. He listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and most surprisingly of all, overruled the prosecutor's objections more often than not. Local attorneys who had come to watch exchanged confused glances. This wasn't the Judge Hargrove they knew. The court reporter, who had worked with the judge for 15 years, kept looking up from her stenotype machine, her expression puzzled. Maya noticed the shift but remained focused on her clients. The Patels sat behind her each day, Mr. Patel in his best suit, Mrs. Patel with fresh flowers pinned to her dupatta. Their teenage son sat with them, watching Maya with undisguised admiration. For them, this wasn't about Maya's personal history with the judge, it was about their livelihood, their future in the community. On the final day, Maya delivered her closing argument without notes, speaking directly to the jury about the clear pattern of discrimination in the county's permit process. As she spoke, several jurors nodded along, their faces showing the same conclusion Maya had led them to. The Patels had been denied their permits solely because of their race. The law doesn't ask us to prove what was in someone's heart, Maya concluded. It asks us to look at actions, at patterns, at results, and the results here speak for themselves. Thank you. She sat down, feeling a strange sense of completion. Whatever happened next with the verdict, she had done what she set out to do 7 years ago. She had returned to this courtroom on her own terms, as a force to be reckoned with. The jury deliberated for just 90 minutes before returning with their decision. The forewoman, a gray-haired woman in a floral blouse, stood to read the verdict. In the case of Patel versus County Business Authority, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. The Patels embraced each other, their son pumping his fist in the air. Maya smiled, accepting their tearful thanks as Judge Hargrove issued his final ruling, ordering the county to approve the permit within 7 days and pay the Patels' legal fees. As the courtroom began to empty, the bailiff approached Maya. Ms. Chen, Judge Hargrove would like to see you in his chambers. Maya had been expecting this. She packed her briefcase calmly, told the Patels she would call them later, and followed the bailiff to a door behind the judge's bench. Judge Hargrove's chambers were exactly as she had imagined them: dark wood bookshelves filled with law books, framed diplomas on the walls, a heavy desk with stacks of files. The judge stood looking out his window, hands clasped behind his back. "Ms. Chen," he said, turning as she entered. "Please, sit down." Maya took a seat across from his desk, waiting as he settled into his chair. For a moment, neither spoke. The ticking of a large wall clock filled the silence. "I remember you," Judge Hargrove finally said. "I spent the last few days going through old files. You represented your cousin in a traffic case 7 years ago. You were just a high school student." "Yes," Maya replied simply. "I was." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I was unkind to you that day." Maya raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to put it." The judge's face flushed. "I want to apologize. My behavior was unprofessional and prejudiced. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you." He looked older in that moment, smaller somehow than the towering figure who had once made her feel worthless. Maya realized that part of her had been waiting years for this apology, imagining how sweet it would taste. But now that it had arrived, she felt nothing but a calm sense of purpose. "Your Honor," she said, straightening in her chair, "I appreciate your apology, but that's not why I came back. I didn't return to this town for your remorse or recognition." "Then why?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I'm not interested in apologies, Your Honor," Maya said firmly. "I'm interested in justice. Justice for my clients, and a fair courtroom for everyone, regardless of their age, gender, or background." Something changed in Judge Hargrove's face, a look of respect, perhaps even admiration. "You've become an exceptional attorney, Ms. Chen." "Yes," Maya agreed, standing up to leave. "I have." As she reached the door, Judge Hargrove spoke again. "Will I be seeing you in my courtroom again, Ms. Chen?" Maya turned back, a small smile on her lips. "Count on it, Your Honor." "I have several cases pending." 1 year later, Maya sat at her desk reviewing case notes when her phone rang. It was Thomas, her boss, calling from the courthouse. "Have you heard the news?" he asked, his voice unusually excited. "What news?" "Judge Hargrove just announced his retirement. Effective next month. Everyone at the courthouse is talking about it." Maya set down her pen, surprised. Judge Hargrove was only 63, young for a judge to retire. "Did he say why?" she asked. "He cited personal reasons in the official announcement," Thomas replied. "But the word around the courthouse is that he's been different this past year. More thoughtful, less quick to judge. Some say he's been troubled by something." After hanging up, Maya walked to the window, looking out at the courthouse in the distance. She thought about the 7 cases she'd argued before Judge Hargrove since the Patel trial. Each time he had been fair, respectful, nothing like the man who had humiliated her years ago. 2 weeks later, Maya received an envelope with the court seal. Inside was a formal invitation to Judge Hargrove's retirement ceremony, along with a handwritten note: "Your presence would mean a great deal to me. Babbage." The ceremony was held in the main courtroom. Judges from neighboring counties attended, along with local officials and attorneys. Maya sat quietly in the back, watching as Judge Hargrove gave his farewell speech. "After 30 years on this bench," he said, "I've come to understand that justice isn't just about knowing the law. It's about seeing people, truly seeing them, regardless of their background or appearance." His eyes found Maya in the crowd. "Sometimes it takes a brave voice to show us our blind spots. I'm grateful for those who had the courage to stand before me, even when I made it difficult." After the speech, as people mingled with cake and punch, Judge Hargrove made his way to Maya. "I'm glad you came," he said. "Congratulations on your retirement," Maya replied. He smiled slightly. "Before I go, I wanted you to know about some changes I've implemented. I've established new procedures for the court, blind review of initial filings, so judges don't see names or backgrounds until necessary, regular bias training for all court staff, a mentorship program for young people interested in law." He handed her a folder. "The details are all here. I'd value your opinion on whether these steps might actually make a difference." Maya took the folder, genuinely surprised. "Thank you. I'll review these." "It's a start," he said. "Not enough, but a start." 3 months after Judge Hargrove's retirement, Maya stood in front of 30 high school students in the community center conference room. Some looked bored, some curious, all from backgrounds underrepresented in the legal profession. "Welcome to the first meeting of the Community Law Project," she said. "This program will give you a taste of what it means to be an attorney with real lawyers as your mentors." A girl in the front row raised her hand. She wore big glasses and had her hair in tight braids. "Yes?" Maya asked. "My mom says you're the best lawyer in town now," the girl said. "What made you want to become a lawyer in the first place?" Maya hadn't planned to tell this story, but looking at the girl's earnest face, she changed her mind. "When I was about your age," she began, "I went to court to help my cousin with a traffic ticket. The judge in the case," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "he didn't believe in me. He made assumptions about who I was and what I could do based on how I looked and where I came from." The students leaned forward, suddenly interested. "That day, I decided to become an attorney, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to prove that people like us belong in those courtrooms. Sometimes," she said, meeting the girl's eyes, "the people who try to hold you back become the very reason you excel. Their doubt becomes your determination." After class, Maya walked home past the courthouse. A new plaque had been installed near the entrance, listing community legal resources and support programs, many of which had been funded by Judge Hargrove's Retirement Foundation. Maya stopped to read it, noticing her own name listed as director of the Youth Mentorship Program. She smiled to herself. This wasn't how she had imagined her story with Judge Hargrove would end when she was a humiliated teenager, not with anger or triumph, but with something that looked remarkably like progress. Sometimes justice took unexpected paths, and sometimes the most important victories weren't won in courtrooms at all.